I think that's one of the things I've learned from looking at all these different fandoms online is like the only people who really lose here are the people who dedicate most of their effort to hating something without creating anything. You're totally valid for feeling that way, but do something with it, man. Like make your own fanzine, make fan art, make a new version of stuff.
Hi, welcome to Mojo. My name is Ivan Zapata, and I'll be your host for this week. This past year, the voices of audiences were louder than ever when it came to the things they liked and disliked, lifting some properties up and bringing a lot of them down. Now more than ever, the fandom space has become not only stronger, but louder and more relevant to the movie industry in particular, but to entertainment as a whole. So, to help us dive headfirst into this universe, we needed someone who lives in a different dimension altogether. So my guest this week is Jack from the channel 404 Tales. He's a creator, an animator, but most importantly, a curator of pop culture and all things fandoms on the internet. So again, welcome to Mojo, and here's my conversation with 404 Tales. Hey Jack, how you doing, man?
Hello, everybody out there on the internet. It is excellent to be here. I've been a fan of WatchMojo for quite a while. I've watched quite a few lists on that your guys' page. It's kind of crazy to be here, honestly.
And also, I'm a huge fan of 404.
Thank you.
I remember the first video I ran into on my For You page on TikTok was the John Cena video.
Disturbance in the internet. Wrestling isn't so much like an actual competitive sport as it is a competitive fictional improv where people actually put their lives on the line to give the performance of a lifetime. Any decision or action these people are taking in character follow them throughout their entire career and can't really be taken back or written away.
I want to, first of all, I want you to give us a little bit of a take on who you are. Who are you? How did you become this character on the internet who surfs the web looking and analyzing like fandoms and stuff like that? So where do you come from?
I live on the internet, and I saw there was kind of not a lot of content about the internet itself on the internet. So I thought I would fill that void by talking about something that I'm really passionate about. I am I like to call myself a fandom fan. People like you will often find my videos and go, oh, okay, so this guy likes wrestling, right? No, that is the only video I've ever made about wrestling because the John Cena event was, I knew just enough about wrestling to know just how big of a deal that was. And I was like, I gotta talk about this. And I like to talk about things for people who aren't even necessarily fans of these fandoms. They have some events that get so big and they're so massive for fandoms. It's hard for me not to get excited about it. And then I got to talk about it, even if I'm not. I've made Kendrick Drake videos. Seems like everyone has something to say about the Kendrick Drake feud now. But you want to know what I think? I think it's neat. I've made Superman videos. Superman is very controversial. Debates, fights, review bombing, video essays. And there's no continuity between my stuff except for it's happening on the internet, and I think it's really, really cool and exciting to talk about.
And you're great at identifying these little like snippets or little like fandom moments on the internet and just like highlighting them, which is awesome. But first of all, I want to start by asking for what you know, for what you live. What is a fandom? I mean, what does it mean to be in a fandom today? I'm gonna preface it by saying, for me, I don't know, I guess I'm a bit older, I'm not sure, but you look, really square, really tight, so it looks good. You look young right now. But for me, I go back to zines, I go back to like forums on the internet, I go back to chat rooms, I go back to blogs, and that's where people kind of express their fandom in their own personal little bubble. So right now, what does it mean to be in a fandom?
So there could be a lot of different definitions of it. I mentioned I did that Kendrick Drake video, and I found it really interesting that the hip hop community does not consider themselves a fandom, but I would personally, it makes it easier for me to think of a fandom as when there's enough people talking about their favorite thing enough that they form a community out of it, where you might eventually start to see people talking about other things other than the actual content they're discussing, they've gotten together to discuss. Yeah, you mentioned zines. I think fan events where people would gather together to talk about their favorite stuff would inevitably turn into talking about other things that are related to it. Or if, you had Star Wars and Star Trek mash up together. And then I think, yeah, a good start for me of what a fandom is when you can start making friends with people outside of just discussing the thing, which seems kind of like counterintuitive, I guess, to say the moment I recognize it as a fandom is when they stop talking about the thing they're gathering to discuss.
Yeah.
But I do think I would say a big marker of the difference between like, oh, people like this thing and they're gathering to talk about it. That's something that everyone does. Movies come and go. People might say like, oh, I really liked this movie last year, but they don't hang around. They don't make fan art of it. They don't keep dwelling on it for years later. Then you can be a fan of something, but there's not really necessarily a community around that thing. But like it's not hard to have that these days. It's pretty easy to find. Go on Tumblr and you'll find a small 200 group of people like scraping together whatever content they can find for this project that's like 15 years old and no one's talked about it in forever, but they're still obsessed with it. They can't stop thinking about it. That's a fandom in my eyes.
And one thing that you add to from what I see to your definition of a fandom is creating your own piece of that fandom based on what you love.
Yes.
I want to go to one quote from one of your videos. It's a Superman video, which is my
Yeah.
favorite on the channel, like on your channel.
Oh, cool.
People like to act like fandoms are ridiculous for getting heated about stuff they love, but that's everyone. That's life. Everyone's just fighting for the things they love, fighting for the stuff they want to see more of.
So I want to deep dive a little bit more into this.
Yeah.
So right. That video, that Superman video, what stuck out to me is not the fact that you were saying that people were right or wrong about Man of Steel or James Gunn's Superman. It was about how passionate they can get for one or the other, and people kind of like not connecting about that or like I don't know, dismissing that passion for Superman. Is that kind of like the through line there?
Yeah, I would absolutely say like that's kind of what I'm talking about, where it's like I think one dude obsessed with one thing, sitting in a room and still making his own talking to himself in his room about it. I wouldn't call that a fandom, but I do think finding community with other people who are like, man, remember how good this was, and then people going, oh, I saw this other thing, and it gives me the same vibes, and like it can still be good, it can come back. And then, like the Man of Steel versus or the Snyder versus James Gunn thing is an interesting point of it because it's almost like there's an ebb and flow to the bigger fandoms. Like Star Trek, I think, is one of the very, very early fandoms that there's like historical evidence of people gathering in a place and talking about this thing. I saw a hilarious meme the other day, and it was somebody saying, this is what it feels like to write fan fiction for Star Trek. And it was that screenshot from the original Avatar, The Last Airbender, where he's looking to his left and seeing all the previous reincarnations that have come through the years. I think definitely a yearning for the thing that you originally fell in love with is definitely a sign of a fandom, and in connecting with other people. And trying to, it's interesting because we're in a weird state now where people are starting to use, it used to be you would just have a team of people making something and then they put it out into the world and then the fandoms would appreciate it. But now everything's become so interconnected and it's almost like fandoms have a authority now. It's almost likely that James Gunn got this shot at Superman because the fans were clamoring for something other than Man of Steel.
Yeah.
And I have to assume at some point, if the Man of Steel fandom and the Snyder fans persist long enough, we might end up going back to something like that as well.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to jump the gun too early. But, there you go. See, bringing the production value to this podcast. Yes. But I want to talk a little bit more about that. The platforms that we're at right now. What is the state of fandoms right now? Because the internet obviously exploded those initial bubbles or events where it was really limited and you live your own passion with a little group of people. But right now it exploded with the internet. So as Netscape Navigator, as you so eloquently put it in your videos, how are fandoms navigating this new not newish, but like newish territory, and there's back and forth and discourse between and within fandoms. So how do you feel the internet is giving, or that home within the internet is like evolving right now?
I think it's changed things dramatically. And I think a lot of people feel this way about the internet. I love the internet, but I think it's created a lot of positive change and negative change in some cases. I think the positive change is obvious. We've already kind of mentioned that. Like, you don't have to be alone and just loving that one thing. You're not weird for it. You can find people just like you. The downside of that, I think I would say, is that now there is almost like a very measurable score for how big and powerful your fandom is.
Mhm.
And there's always been some bad blood in fandoms. I think that's also historically trackable, of how passionate people can get about their thing and therefore get really upset at other people who are opposing what they see as good.
Mhm.
And now it's almost like it feels similar to politics in some sense, where there's a winner and a loser more so than ever before. Not just because of the fact that fandoms are able to be heard more, but I would say the people who are investing in these projects, who are putting money and betting on it, can now point directly at us, the fans, and say, well, they're saying this, and there's approximately 10 million of them saying this.
Mhm.
Therefore, we can translate this into this amount of money. So where before, I think you had people fighting over, if Spock and Kirk were a good ship or not, and it wasn't really a big deal. But now you have the executives looking at these forums
Yeah.
and these discussions and saying, this is important now. We have to care about this. And I would say, like, I think the biggest place you see this right now is with Star Wars,
Yeah.
where you can look at the constantly changing opinion on what is and isn't good Star Wars changing on a yearly basis,
On what even
because
is Star Wars? That
right.
discussion is yeah. No, I get you.
And what we're seeing is Disney, as opposed to Lucas, who was one guy with a vision, who
Mhm.
was probably pretty annoyed with all of us for telling him what to do. Now you have Disney going, please tell me what we should do. And we're finding very quickly that the fandom isn't necessarily great at picking winners. I think we keep seeing Star Wars pivot. Yeah.
Like you mentioned, I mean, I think this overexposure of fandoms all over the place, it is a double-edged sword, because it does give fandoms a lot of power. It does give fandoms a lot of initiative, to go out there and to speak their mind, and to bash absolutely everything, or love absolutely everything, or bash each other, stuff like that. But
Mhm.
do you think it's getting, and to speak a little bit negatively about it, because it's really
Yeah.
beautiful and I love being, but to speak a little bit negatively about it, do you think fandoms are being kind of weaponized right now, as not only to create content and to like really know where entertainment is going, but also in the political spectrum, in the social spectrum,
Right.
especially in the US, they're being like kind of weaponized for this, and some of them like won't stand for it, or some of them like really get into it as well. So, do you see this as well?
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, I think it's interesting because we're starting to see. You mentioned in my Superman video where I'm talking about it's okay and normal for people to fight over this stuff. I think it's just a silly line to draw and say, if you're talking about something that is, entertainment, why do you get so upset about that? And like, you can look at sports. You can look at, and like, politics is obviously has a lot bigger real world implications when people are arguing over that stuff. But you do see communities of people propping up around politics as well when people get really passionate about something, an issue. And I think that line is blurring. But I think the one consistent thing, and like, I don't really feel comfortable labeling, like, communities where people discuss politics as politics fandoms, but like, I do feel
Yeah.
like there's a
I
lot of
mean, they have
overlap that's very upsetting to see. Yeah.
it's obvious they have fan fiction somewhere in
Yes. Yeah. I mean, like
about their
we,
favorite
yeah.
politicians.
I think the director, I mean, okay, well, hold on. People don't, and this is the thing, people don't like, I understand why people say, I don't get politics in my entertainment. And
Yeah,
that's also a whole fandom discussion as well.
yeah.
So I'll avoid steering too much into politics.
I
But
get you. I
yeah,
get you.
I'll just say that there's a lot of overlap in the way these kinds of communities behave.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, there's a third group that I would also point to, just to make this even more controversial, I guess. Religion has a lot of overlap with fandoms in some cases, where what it all comes down to is its ideologies. And I know a lot of people don't like thinking about heavy stuff when you're talking about your space fighters and your silly stuff. You don't necessarily want it to get heavy. But at the end of the day, what a lot of fandom is people fighting for the things that they think are right and good. And because of that, I think people get very, very heated and take it very, very seriously. I don't know about you, but going in to see Superman opening day felt very different than it has to go see movies in the past, because it felt like there was a lot riding on it, a lot more than just, whether the new DC universe is going to work out. It was I knew it was going to shape the conversation moving forward online for probably years to come,
And I
based on
completely
how that experience was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I completely agree, because with Superman, it started like way before that, because we already like knew the Snyderverse was kind of over. What are they going to do next? And then we start to see things pop up from James Gunn's Superman, and the discussion at that point all over the place, even the political spectrum, was going to a place where it was going to become relevant, where Superman was definitely going to become relevant, because he's a nice guy, because he is, like you mentioned in your video, the embodiment of pure distilled good,
Yeah.
So it was going to get in there at one point. But I do want to, I saw a take from a creator not long ago
Okay.
who said comic books and comic book fandoms are more and more impervious to ideological or political divide. What
Hmm.
did he mean? We know as comic book fans who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. So I'm going to go back to the Punisher, the
Okay.
Punisher, his logo being used everywhere by police, by military, right now by ICE agents in the States and stuff like that. We know it's being weaponized. We know it's being used for something that, for people who clearly have not read the Punisher comic books, right? And
Or
we
have their own very specific
exactly,
interpretation that's different from what other
exactly,
people might have.
exactly.
Yeah.
And the same with Superman. It's been, the American tale and all this stuff that was around Superman, but we know he's good. We know what he stands for. So how do you feel about that? Do you think the comic book fandom is a little bit more impervious because we kind of know where our heroes and villains like kind of stand, and it's a line that they seldom cross,
Love that question. I would say that I think it's a good meeting ground. I think we all kind of come together to discuss these characters, and even if we do, some people, the thing that bummed me out, I mean, like, it's funny because like even you can say you're a Punisher fan, right?
Mhm.
And that might set off some alarm bells in some people's brains because you don't know what kind of Punisher they're a fan of. And the same goes for like Man of Steel Superman versus James Gunn Superman. They are basically the same character for all intents and purposes, but there are some pretty key differences into how they're interpreted that stands out to me. I remember I consider the immigrant story aspect of Superman a key part of it.
Yeah.
However, I've spoke to someone recently who considered it part of the canon, but
Yeah.
not necessarily important to the character. And I think it is important to recognize that there are aspects of every character that people consider to be more or less important. Like one guy might have only read one Punisher comic, but his Punisher in his mind, like that's more than enough for him to be, part of the fandom.
Yeah.
Does he have a legitimate interpretation of the character? That's something that the Punisher fandom probably has a better idea of than I do. I don't think I'm familiar with the character. I'm familiar that a huge aspect of his character arc in most interpretations I've ever seen is working outside of the law to create his own justice, and how tricky that can be. And people can interpret that however they want, because stories usually are kind of vague about that kind of thing, if for any reason, so that a lot of people can appreciate the story and not necessarily just people who feel a certain way. Yeah. So it's like, and that's what you just said right there, is like weirdly controversial take of their interpreting the Punisher wrong. Because I'm willing to bet if you told that to one of those guys, they'd say, no, I agree, actually, you're wrong. So
I mean, and the finger pointing starts, you know. So no, but exactly. I understand. I completely understand, and I think it's a factor of right now all these stories kind of merging with reality, because we saw it with Andor right now in Star Wars. You know, for example, the people, Andor is the epitome of Star Wars right now, and it goes deep into what Star Wars like actually means socially right now, rebellion, and what it actually takes to be a rebel, and what it actually takes for it to be for there to be an empire, and the steps the empire will take. So, and that again merging into like what is happening right now globally also has a toll on the fandoms, because we can all agree that, you know, I don't know if we can all agree, but that maybe this is the Star Wars that we need right now, the story from Star Wars that we need told right now. So that's interesting, and it goes to my next point of the power of fandoms right now. As I mentioned in the intro, is they're becoming louder, they're becoming more and more relevant, not only driving where entertainment is going or which movies are going to get made, but socially what stories are being told, right? Because not only fandoms are creating these stories, and they're coming up, you know, they came up through the ranks of their fandom to finally become the creators of that you know, that story, or the, you know, the people who are carrying now that torch. But even in a smaller scale, Ugly Sonic is,
oh my gosh, that's so crazy. I was literally like going in my head, Ugly Sonic. I wanted to bring up Sonic earlier because I feel like it's that fandom is the perfect case study for having a lot of rough years for the thing that you love, and the fandom coming together, like getting better than the, I mean, like that might be a controversial take in itself, but I think it's very impressive to see. You can kind of track the Sonic fandom, where you can see Sega kind of stopped caring about Sonic because it was making money regardless of whether or not it was good stuff, in my interpretation. Then maybe that's controversial as the Punisher thing, I don't know. But I think now we're seeing a Sega reaching out to the fandom. I often think about an artist I've been following for a very long time, Tyson Heese, I think is how his last name is pronounced. Made a very, very funny, kind of vulgar Sonic comic that went viral.
Oh, I saw that. Yes.
And he was already a talented artist. Later got a job working at Archie Comics, doing the art for the official Sonic comic.
That's awesome.
And then when the whole Ugly Sonic thing happened, guess who they hired to help redesign Sonic? So he went from making a very fandom, very unofficial comic to, I think he's like one of the lead artists on the Sonic movies.
That's awesome.
So I was immediately, it's so funny that you went straight to that, because as you were describing that sensation or that kind of thing happening, it's happening everywhere. But I can't think of a more perfect example.
And as of late, it's one of the most public displays of like fandom rage, changing the result of a movie, because
for the better,
better, and it came at a cost of like millions and millions of dollars for them to like remake the entire movie because fans weren't happy, you know. So that's
so bad for those animators, man. I can't imagine, because the thing is, you have to do what the people at top are doing, and I guaranteed there were a lot of animators spending all that time working on that Sonic, going, "This is a mess. This isn't great. I don't like this, but I'm going to do it. I need that bit. I need that paycheck." And then for them to go, you know what? We've decided this doesn't look good, so we're going to do it this way now. But you know what? As long as artists are, the more like, and then like I said, in this case, it was a good thing. I think ultimately it saved the movie, got the fans excited about it. I'm sure it would have probably still did decent numbers, but you saw the fandom completely do a 180 on that franchise because of it. And they went from being like upset about it to being on the side of the movie and pushing it forward and celebrating it. It became a banner of, look, this is what happens when you listen to us and you celebrate this thing. I think the flip side of that is, I think some people don't think fandom should have any say, right, in what is being done, and like some studios almost do worse when trying to capitulate to fans, because it becomes a, like a checklist of things you got to check off to make the fans happy. And I think oftentimes that's more so coming from an outsider trying to interpret, trying to amalgamate what all these different fans are saying. I keep going. I hate to keep on hitting Star Wars, but I do think I did see Andor for the first time the other day, and I would agree that it is a very compelling and interesting movie, especially, or series to watch, especially right now. But Rise of Skywalker, I think, is a great example of listening to the fandom almost to a detriment, I would say. Or I don't know. How do you feel about that movie? Maybe this is the first one we don't see eye to eye on.
Mistakes were made on that. Well,
I still know there are fans of it out there. I had a pretty intense discussion with the guy about who was like defending it. He still loved it. So look, I know there's fans out there. But
the sequel trilogy for me is a series of mistakes that were made while it was going on. I mean, decisions weren't final when they started. So as they were making it, the decisions they were making were not the correct ones. I like a lot about the sequel. I like a lot about the movies. I enjoyed them a lot. But I do recognize as time goes on, and I've seen them again, that some decisions weren't. They just weren't the right ones. And I think the fans saw that, and I think new audiences. I think you will find more fans of the new movies within newer audiences to Star Wars than before, than prior fans of Star Wars, because they kind of repeated the same thing in the Force Awakens, and then all the different things they made with those movies. So that's kind of like my take on it. I'm in like the middle ground, but I am enjoying a lot of what they're doing, because they are trying to make original takes and original series, original characters, Andor being like the main one for me. But I appreciate that they keep doing it. The last, I think the hill that I'll die on with Star Wars is,
I'm excited.
The hill that I'll die on Star Wars is they need to keep making Star Wars. I don't want Star Wars to stop, because it's not for everyone, but what they do, every time they do something new, it gets me excited to watch it.
That's cool.
I like the Acolyte. I haven't seen the little with the Goonies style show that came out with Jude Law.
Oh I saw. It's okay. So maybe this is our first argument, because I think for me, Star Wars is an event. And I think the more I do want them to keep making Star Wars, but I think the more you do of Star Wars, the less special it becomes, if that makes sense. I think I like Star Wars as more of a big event. I would love it if it was like a thing that you get a new trilogy every decade, and then you don't get a whole lot more. And then that way it's kind of like still a special thing. Even if it's not great, people still get excited to go see it. People still have their favorites. I mean, we don't got to get too into it, because now we're going super niche into this one fandom. We're supposed to be talking about fandoms. But I do think it is interesting how we have generations of Star Wars fans now. Yep. And in the same way we've seen one generation completely dismiss the prequels that Lucas did, and then the generation following that prop those back up again as something very special because they grew up with it. I wouldn't be surprised if we see another third generation of, what we now consider the sequel era prop up as like, these were actually brilliant. And maybe they just weren't for me. Maybe it's this other generation that's enjoying them right now is going to appreciate them more than I ever could. And I think that's one of the things I've learned from looking at all these different fandoms online, is like the only people who really lose here are the people who dedicate most of their effort to hating something without
Yeah,
creating anything.
I agree.
So yeah, it's like I think the looking at a fandom or looking at a new franchise or a new interpretation of a franchise and just sitting there going, "This sucks. I hate this. This is bad." That's really the only like you're totally valid for feeling that way, but do something with it, man. Like make your own fanzine, make fan art, talk about like make a new version of stuff.
But segue into what are the latest or most recent fandoms that you think right now are the most interesting, at least for you who
Ooh.
kind of live through this and kind of study this, you know, to make your content.
And I'm biased on this because I am an animator, so I do like to. I know animation isn't for everybody; it's not everyone's favorite medium. But I think there's been a really interesting boom of indie animation right now that has been able to function with a direct line to the to the fandom.
Yeah.
A pilot just came out from Glitch Productions
Mhm.
called "The Knights of Guinevere," and I believe the team was formed after a Disney show, I think called The Owl House, got canceled a
So,
little prematurely. And they went to this smaller YouTube channel that you might know from doing Amazing Digital Circus was another one that's been pretty popular, which kind of taps into, and this might I know some of the people working on it, but it tapped into like a more it kind of feels like targeting the Five Nights at Freddy's audience a little bit.
okay.
Like they've kind of grown up a little bit, but they're still interested in this idea of like a very colorful horror kind of atmosphere. And I think what it's so interesting to me about that fandom in Glitch Productions, and then I'll just shout out a few more. Has Been Hotel. An interesting project going on right now is the Homestuck revival. I don't know if you know Homestuck, if that
No,
sounds familiar
no.
to you at all.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
is a entirely online produced odyssey. Like it's actually a huge sprawling. It was a like daily, bi-weekly, weekly, monthly updating comic that also had like animation in it. And the
Oh,
fandom became,
nice.
if you don't know Homestuck, I bet if you were like in the con scene in the 2000s, you would be aware of the Homestuck fans. It like their fandom kind of ended up retroactively, like people were more aware of the fandom than they were for the actual product at the time.
Mhm.
And interestingly enough, like it's almost like you talk to the Homestuck fandom and it sounds like talking to like a veteran, asking a veteran about a war. They're like, haven't heard that name in a long time. Homestuck, Hussy. Those were different times. And like, and what's crazy is an artist named Vivzy Pop. It has a Amazon backed uh animation that like another artist who got their start online deviant art kind of era stuff back in the
Mhm.
2010s, and now they're doing full-fledged productions of animated seasons of stuff that's pulling in huge crowds at conventions and stuff like that.
Mhm.
I think largely because it's they're putting it all up for free online, so it's like some of the highest quality YouTube content you can find. It looks like something that would be on television or in a movie theater or on a streaming platform, but they're posting to YouTube right away, and the fandom is pretty intense. And I
Mhm.
think it's very interesting that they're bringing back a old franchise. I don't even know if you can call Homestuck a franchise. That feels gross. They're bringing back Homestuck, which has a very interesting fandom history, and they're exposing it now to this new audience, and that's going to be interesting.
Is that kind of like the way fandoms go full circle? Because I know as they become creators and they see their stuff out there, is that work, or are those creations better served in a smaller scale to their own fandoms, or what does it take for them to like kind of like break away into the mainstream, for example?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. I think the the biggest thing that you need to break out, like I have something I like to call, and this is kind of one of the reasons that's a good idea for me to make a video, when suddenly you have everyone talking about something, even people outside of the fandom. That's the Kendrick Lamar, that's the John Cena kind of moments, where all of a sudden everyone has an opinion on this because everyone's being exposed to it and weighing in on it. I do think there needs to be, to get out of that bubble, you really need man, it's hard. I think it used to be influencers were a big part of
Mhm.
it. You
Yeah.
see a lot of Undertale, Five Nights at Freddy's, you can track a lot of those success of those two franchises, not just to being good, compelling, interesting games, but because huge Let's Players were blowing up at that time and were able to capitalize on these cool games to spread, and like people got excited about the games. It was like a very symbiotic relationship, right, between influencers and media to talk about the media. When people get excited about media, they want to talk about it. So they'll find influencers who are talking about it. And then influencers will be eager for more media to come out. So then that benefits the media. That's a cyclical relationship that is often very helpful for getting, news out there. I think a lot of Let's Players now make money by acting as advertising to like say, hey, play our game on your stream. And if it does well, maybe you can keep playing it and we'll cut you in or something like that. But I think the bigger thing is seeing people getting excited about something is what it takes to get outside of just your little insular thing. Like just getting, like, I think I saw Mr. Beast tweeting about that Knights of Guinevere thing. And I would never thought he would be a fan of that, but it's interesting. Like I wanted to give them credit because he thought what they were doing was really interesting. And I think that's what you need to really get success. And it's, you need to get people who have no idea what this thing is, but they're like, what is it? Like, I want to know now. Like you can, and that's hard because, I think that's one of the reasons movies are struggling these days is because it takes a financial investment up front to get involved with it. But
like movies, I feel movies aren't getting the chance to be talked about as much as they were before. They're either good or bad, which sucks. Because you don't get that conversation. You don't get people excited. You don't get people passionately talking about those movies to see if they're good or bad. It's just like it's just like a constant headbutting, and then that's it. That's
influencing the studios too. They're like, we're not going to make this unless it's going to be beloved and everyone's going to talk about it. I saw the Minecraft movie the other day, and I was like, this was cool, but I bet there could have been a lot of other cool things also. But you have to do something that's already popular nowadays to make a successful movie.
And that's another example of like fandoms really, speaking up and going like, no, this is actually kind of interesting and a good take on what we like, on what we're passionate about. So let's talk about it. Okay. We're closing down here, but let me, I know.
I can keep going, man. I can keep going.
So let's save it for a part 2,
All right.
Who knows?
Okay.
All right,
okay.
But anyway, thank you so much for this conversation, man. This was great. This was a great time. I'm going to keep following the channel. Please invite people to all your channels. Go for it. You have.
Oh, okay. You guys can find me by looking up 404 Tales. That's TALES on just about every single platform you can imagine. I think I'm not doing a whole lot of streaming, but man, I'm on TikTok. I'm on Instagram. I'm on YouTube. I think I still have an X account. I'm on Blue Sky. If you know a platform that I'm not on, let me know. I will go to it. I love the internet. I love exploring new places, and I love talking to strangers. So hit me up.
Perfect. And, stealing from you again, safe travels, Netscape Navigators. And we'll see you here again at Mojo in our next episode. So thank you again. See you later. Bye guys.